The night had teeth. The wind came crawling down from the mountains, sharp and cold, slipping through the cracks of Evelyn Carter's cabin like a ghost that refused to be forgotten. The fire in the stone hearth spat and hissed, throwing amber light across the rough-hewn walls. Outside, coyotes yipped at the edge of the dark, their lonely cries cutting through the silence of the Arizona frontier. Evelyn sat near the fire, her shawl drawn tight around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the flames. The wood popped and she flinched, a reflex she'd never shaken since that night a year ago. The night her husband hadn't come home. Tom Carter had been a good man, or at least a decent one. He'd loved his whiskey, loved the land more than he'd ever loved her. But he'd worked hard, built this cabin board by board, and dreamed of starting a family. Then the raids came. Apache, they'd said. Maybe. Out here, truth and rumor were often the same thing. The men found Tom's horse days later, riderless, saddle bloodied. They'd buried what they could find. Now it was just her. The wind moaned through the chimney and she rose to shut the door latch tighter. The world outside was black and endless, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. She hated nights like this, too quiet, too alive with memories. Evelyn was 30, though the years of hard living had carved faint lines around her mouth and eyes. Her hair, once sun-gold, was duller now, pinned back in a loose braid. The townsfolk still called her the Carter widow. They said it softly, like it was a curse. Some pitied her, some avoided her altogether. After all, she lived alone on land the Apache once roamed. She tried not to think about it. Her hands busied themselves with mending an old shirt, Tom's, one she couldn't bring herself to throw away. The needle pricked her finger and a drop of blood bloomed bright against the fabric. She cursed softly and went to rinse it in the basin when she heard it. A sound outside, not the wind. Not a coyote, a thud, followed by the groan of the porch boards under a heavy weight. Her heart slammed hard in her chest. She froze, listening. The firelight flickered, shadows twisting like they had a mind of their own. She reached for the shotgun hanging by the door, hands trembling but steady enough to load a shell. "Who's there?" she called, voice tight. No answer. Just the soft scrape of boots, or was it bare feet? Against the porch wood. She aimed the barrel toward the door. "I said, who's there?" The latch creaked. Then the door swung open and a gust of cold wind rushed in. The figure in the doorway stumbled forward, a man tall and broad-shouldered but slumped like a felled tree. The firelight caught his face and her breath hitched. He wasn't white, skin the color of copper dust, hair black as the night itself, and across his shoulder, a wound so deep it glistened dark and wet. His eyes, heavy-lidded with pain, locked on hers. For one heartbeat she thought he might speak. Then he collapsed. The gun clattered to the floor. Evelyn's body moved before her mind caught up. She dropped beside him, pressing her hands to the wound. His blood was hot against her palms. He wasn't dead yet, but he would be soon if she didn't act. Every word the townsfolk had ever said about the Apache came rushing back. They're killers, savages. Leave them to the coyotes. But she wasn't made for cruelty. With a muttered prayer, she dragged his heavy body across the floor close to the fire. The scent of blood filled the cabin, iron and smoke mingling. She tore open his shirt with shaking hands, revealing skin marked by scars, old ones, deep ones. "Don't you die here," she whispered fiercely. "Not in my home." He didn't answer, but his hand twitched, just enough to grip hers. Outside, the wind howled again. Inside, the firelight flickered over two souls the world had already forgotten, a lonely widow and a dying Apache, bound together by fate neither of them had asked for. When morning came, the desert looked washed clean, like the world had been reborn in golden dust. Sunlight spilled through the cracks in Evelyn's shutters, landing on the face of the man who still lay near her hearth. His skin slick with sweat, his breath shallow but steady. She hadn't slept. All night she'd sat beside him, keeping the fire alive and pressing cloth after cloth against his shoulder wound. She'd seen men die before. Out here it wasn't uncommon, but not like this. Not in her home. Not by her hand's mercy. Evelyn watched him now, trying to make sense of what she'd done. The townsfolk would call her mad. Helping an Apache? That was as good as asking for trouble. But something inside her, a quiet voice that refused to be silenced, kept saying she'd done the right thing. He shifted, groaned low, and his eyes blinked open. dark, sharp, and alert even through the haze of pain. For a long heartbeat, neither moved. Then he tried to sit up. "Don't," she said quickly, pressing a hand to his chest. "You'll tear it open again." His gaze dropped to where her hand rested, then lifted back to her face. He spoke, his voice rough and low, the words thick with accent but clear enough. "You help me?" She hesitated. "Yes, you were bleeding to death on my porch. I couldn't just let you die." He blinked, studying her like he couldn't quite believe it. Why? That single word hit deeper than she expected. Why indeed? She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Because no one deserves to die alone," she finally said. He looked away, jaw tightening. "You have brave heart. Or foolish." Evelyn almost smiled. Maybe both. She fetched water from the basin and knelt beside him again. He tried to push her hands away when she reached for his wound, but she gave him a look sharp enough to cut steel. "You can sit there and argue, or you can let me clean it. Up to you." For a second, something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe even amusement. Then he leaned back and let her work. As she cleaned and rewrapped the wound, she saw more of him, the breadth of his chest, the sinew and muscle beneath his skin, the scars that told stories she could only guess at. There were so many. She couldn't help but wonder how a man survived this much hurt. When she finished, she handed him a tin cup of water. He took it slowly, nodding once in thanks. "Taza," he said finally, touching his chest. "Evelyn," she replied. "Evelyn Carter." "Taza," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt on his tongue. He tried to stand, and she moved fast to steady him. "You're not going anywhere," she warned. "You need rest." His eyes softened just slightly. "You afraid?" She held his gaze. "If I were afraid, you'd still be outside." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was weighted, like something unspoken had settled between them. The fire cracked. The morning light turned warmer, spilling across his face. He looked younger then, not like the enemy she'd been taught to fear, but like a man who'd seen too much and carried it quietly. She poured him a bowl of broth, and he took it with both hands, drinking slow. His manners were careful, almost reverent. She found herself watching the line of his jaw, the way his lashes lowered as he ate. Then she caught herself staring and looked away quickly, busying her hands with the kettle. "You rest here until you're strong enough to leave," she said over her shoulder. "After that, I go," he finished, his tone flat, certain. She nodded, though something about the word made her chest ache in a way she didn't want to name. Taza lay back against the blankets, eyes half closed again. "Evelyn Carter," he murmured, voice soft as a whisper of wind. "You save life of Apache. That make you enemy of your own people." She swallowed hard. "Maybe I'm already used to being alone." Outside, the sun climbed higher, spilling heat across the land. Inside, the cabin held its own quiet warmth. Two souls who shouldn't have met, sharing a fragile peace neither fully understood. The days crawled by slow, like time itself didn't dare move too fast around them. Taza's strength returned piece by piece. By the third morning, he could sit up on his own. By the fifth, he was outside chopping firewood like he'd lived there his whole life. Evelyn watched from the porch, trying not to stare. But she failed more often than not. Each swing of his axe was precise, powerful, and silent. He didn't waste motion. Didn't speak much either. But when he did, when that deep, low voice rolled through her cabin, it stirred something inside her that she hadn't felt since before Tom died. Something dangerous. The townsfolk had started to notice her absences from church, her silence in town, and her locked cabin door when they came calling. Folks in a small town could smell secrets like wolves smelled blood. Evelyn knew that better than anyone. She warned Taza to stay inside when riders passed by the ridge. But sometimes she caught him near the window, watching the world beyond the glass, eyes distant and haunted. "They took my brother," he told her one evening, his English halting but heavy with grief. "Soldiers. Say he steal horse. He not come back?" Evelyn didn't know what to say. All her life she'd been told Apaches were wild, cruel, untamable. But the man sitting across from her, quiet, loyal, scarred, was none of those things. He was wounded, yes, but in ways that had nothing to do with his shoulder. She poured him coffee, watching the steam rise. "You're not like they say," she murmured. Taza looked up, brow furrowed. "Like who say?" "The town. The soldiers. The preachers, everyone." He studied her for a long moment, then said, "They not know me." You not know me, she held his gaze. I'm learning. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened just a little. That was more than enough. Later that afternoon, she found him fixing the fence line behind the barn. The sun beat down hard, glinting off his skin. He'd stripped down to his trousers, the muscles in his back flexing as he worked. Evelyn's throat went dry. She told herself to look away, but her body didn't listen. When he turned, she froze, caught in his gaze. For a second, neither moved. Then she muttered, "You'll make yourself sick working like that." His mouth quirked at one corner. Apache strong. Not weak like white man in town. Evelyn huffed, trying to sound annoyed. Pride's killed more men than bullets. He didn't answer, just went back to work. But the smile, small, knowing, never left his face. That night a coyote cried out close to the cabin and she woke with her heart racing. Through the open doorway she saw Taza by the dying fire, his silhouette calm and watchful. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked softly. He looked at her, eyes glowing amber in the flickering light. "Sleep come when danger gone." Evelyn sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Danger's always around here. Outlaws, soldiers, storms, life itself." He tilted his head. "You afraid?" She thought about that. "Not anymore." He nodded once, approving. "Good. Fear make heart weak." Silence fell again, comfortable this time. The firelight painted his face in gold and shadow. She studied him, the strong lines, the calm eyes, the quiet power. And then, before she could stop herself, she said, "You shouldn't have to hide like an animal." Taza looked into the fire. "World not made for men like me." Not anymore, her heart twisted. Maybe it's not made for women like me either. Their eyes met and something passed between them. Something wordless but undeniable. For a moment, the rest of the world fell away. When she finally turned back to her bed, her pulse wouldn't slow. She'd saved his life. He'd begun to heal hers. But deep down, she knew this kind of kindness, this closeness, was a dangerous thing in a world that didn't forgive either of them. The storm rolled in without warning. By dusk, the horizon had vanished behind a wall of gray, and the wind came screaming down the valley like a living thing. Evelyn had seen plenty of desert storms before, but this one was different, angrier, louder, full of grit and thunder that rattled her bones. She'd barely finished tying down the shutters when rain began to pour, hard enough to sting. Lightning split the sky wide open, lighting up the cabin for a heartbeat before plunging it back into trembling dark. Inside, Taza built up the fire, his movements quick and sure. "Windstrong," he said, voice steady even as the door rattled on its hinges. "Roof hold." "It's held before," she replied, though she wasn't entirely sure this time. "But if it gives, we'll be swimming in mud before morning." He gave a low sound that might have been a laugh. The storm howled, but somehow the small glow from the hearth made the cabin feel like its own world, a pocket of warmth against the wild outside. When Evelyn sat down near the fire, she realized she was shivering. Her clothes were damp, her hair clinging to her neck. She reached for the kettle, but her hands trembled. "Cold," Taza said softly. It wasn't a question. "I'll be fine," she murmured. "Just need to warm up." He crouched beside her, the heat of his body close enough to make her pulse skip. His eyes, dark and steady, lingered on her face. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt charged, not just with lightning, but something deeper. "You work too hard," he said finally. She let out a shaky laugh. "Someone's got to." He hesitated, then said, "You strong woman." But even strong women need rest. His tone wasn't scolding. It was gentle, almost protective. She didn't know how to answer that. Instead, she focused on the fire. Flames reflected in her eyes, and when she looked up again, she caught him studying her like he was memorizing every detail. Lightning flashed again, bright enough to show the scars across his chest and shoulder, where the bandage had been. Without thinking, she reached out. Her fingers brushed the mark, raised, rough, a reminder of all he'd endured. He tensed but didn't pull away. "They hurt you," she whispered. He looked into the fire. "They fear what they don't understand." Her throat tightened. "So do I." His gaze met hers, calm and certain. "You not afraid now?" "No," she admitted. "Not anymore." The storm outside roared louder, shaking the walls. The roof creaked and she flinched. Taza moved instinctively closer, his hand steadying her shoulder. His touch was warm, steady in a way that anchored her. They stayed that way, close enough for her to feel the rhythm of his breath, the scent of rain and smoke on his skin. The fire popped and the cabin seemed to shrink around them. Evelyn spoke softly, like the words might break the spell. "You ever miss where you came from?" "Your home?" he nodded. "Mountains. Sun on red rock. River near my village. Gone now." His voice went quieter. "Soldiers burned it. My people scatter like sand." She swallowed hard, grief catching in her chest, not just for him but for herself too, for everything this wild land had taken. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He turned his head toward her. "You have sorrow in eyes too." Evelyn blinked, her throat tightening. "I lost someone I loved. I thought I'd buried the part of me that could feel again. And now?" He asked softly. Her answer came without thought, just truth. "Now I'm not so sure." Lightning flashed one more time and thunder rolled close behind it. The wind screamed outside, but inside the world had gone quiet. Taza's hand lingered near hers on the floor. Neither pulled away. Outside, the rain pounded the earth. Inside, something just as fierce began to grow, quiet, forbidden, and unstoppable. The storm had blown itself out by morning, leaving the desert washed clean. The air smelled of wet earth and sage, and the world outside gleamed like a promise. But inside the cabin, the air was different, still heavy, still charged. Something had shifted during the night. Evelyn felt it the moment she opened her eyes. Taza was already awake, standing by the doorway, watching the horizon with the same stillness that marked everything he did. He looked like part of the land itself, strong, grounded, carved from wind and stone. She watched him for a moment before rising. The blanket slipped from her shoulders and the movement caught his attention. His eyes flicked toward her, then away, polite but aware. "Storm's passed," she said softly. He nodded. "Yes, sky clear, air clean." She busied herself with the coffee pot, but her hands weren't steady. Her mind replayed the night before, the thunder, the lightning, the moment when their hands had almost touched. Almost. The sound of his voice pulled her back. "You not sleep much," he said. "Neither did you," she replied, managing a small smile. He tilted his head slightly as if trying to read her mood. "You think too much. Like caged bird." Evelyn's laugh was soft but sad. "Maybe because I've been in a cage too long." Taza didn't answer, but his expression changed, something understanding, something that saw more than she said. Later, while she hung laundry on the line, she saw him near the creek, washing the bandage from his wound. The sunlight struck the water, glinting over his bare shoulders. He was quiet, calm, but every move he made carried strength. Her heart did a strange little twist in her chest. It wasn't wrong to look, she told herself. But it wasn't safe either. That afternoon, Taza returned from the edge of the property with a stack of firewood and a wild rabbit he'd trapped. "For supper," he said simply, laying it on the counter. Evelyn looked up from her work, brow furrowed. "You didn't have to." He stopped her with a glance, gentle but firm. "You feed me." "I help you," she hesitated, then smiled. "Fair enough." As she cleaned and cooked the rabbit, he helped repair a loose board in the roof, his presence filling the small space. The rhythm of domestic life settled between them, simple, unspoken, yet full of quiet electricity. When night came, the silence outside was deep. The desert had a way of swallowing sound after rain, as if it too were holding its breath. Evelyn sat near the fire, her hands idle for once. Taza sat across from her, sharpening a knife. The scrape of stone against steel was slow, steady, almost hypnotic. She watched him for a long while before finally asking, "Do you ever wonder what it'd be like to live without fear?" His eyes lifted to hers. "Every day," she swallowed. "And if you could?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Then I would not hide. I would go where I wish, speak what I feel." Her breath caught at that last part. "And what do you feel, Taza?" The question hung in the air, trembling between them. The fire popped. His eyes, dark, unreadable, held hers without flinching. He set the knife down slowly. "You ask what not meant to be spoken?" Evelyn's heart pounded. "Maybe it needs to be." He rose then, slow and deliberate, and crossed the room until he stood before her. The firelight painted gold over his skin, over the faint scars and the deep calm of his face. She didn't move. Couldn't. He reached out, his fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "You play with fire, Evelyn Carter," he murmured. Her voice came out as a whisper. Maybe I'm tired of the cold. For a long moment they stood there, inches apart, the firelight flickering between them like a heartbeat. The wall between them, fear, grief, everything cracked. And though neither crossed the line that night, they both knew the truth. The wall had shattered, and there was no rebuilding it now. The heat came back to the desert with a vengeance. Days turned long and bright, the sky an endless blue. Evelyn worked in the garden while Taza mended fences, their lives falling into an easy rhythm that neither dared to name. But beneath every look, every shared silence, something burned hotter than the sun itself. She told herself she could handle it, this strange pull, this quiet hunger that came alive every time his eyes lingered too long. But by the third week it had become impossible to ignore. That evening a wind rose out of nowhere, dry, hot, restless. Dust danced through the valley and the horizon shimmered in gold. Evelyn was at the wash basin when Taza came in, shirtless from the day's work, his skin bronzed, muscles slick with sweat. He set down the bucket of water and their eyes met. Something shifted. Neither spoke. The air between them felt thick, almost alive. "Storm coming again," he said finally, glancing toward the window. She nodded, but her voice didn't work. Her hands fumbled with the towel and she cursed softly when it fell. Taza bent to pick it up, and when he rose they were too close, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath, the heartbeat beneath his chest. Her fingers twitched at her sides. You should wash up," she said, her voice thin, trembling at the edges. He studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "I use basin outside." He turned to go and she spoke before she could stop herself. "No," he stopped, looked back. "Stay," she said, softer this time. A flicker of something crossed his face. Hesitation, then heat. The wind outside howled, slamming the shutters. Inside, the firelight flickered across their faces. Evelyn's heart pounded so hard it hurt. For years she'd lived behind walls, grief, fear, loneliness. But tonight all of it felt too heavy to carry anymore. When he took a step toward her, she didn't move away. "Evelyn," he said quietly, his voice rough. "This not right for your people." She met his gaze, steady, breathless. "My people left me behind a long time ago." He reached up, his hand hovering near her cheek but not touching. "If I stay, everything change?" Her lips trembled, but her words came firm. "It already has." For a moment the world stopped. Then she took a step closer, so close the fabric of her dress brushed his skin. Her voice was barely a whisper now, trembling between defiance and need. "Undress me now," she said, "or I'll do it myself." The words hung in the air, raw and real. Taza froze, every muscle in his body tight with restraint. His jaw flexed. His breath came hard. Slowly he lifted his hand and brushed his fingers down the side of her arm, as if memorizing what he'd only dreamed of touching. "Evelyn, please," she whispered, her voice breaking on the word. That was all it took. He moved closer, slow, reverent, as if afraid she might vanish. His hands found the edge of her shawl, his touch light, careful. She stood still, eyes never leaving his. When he let the shawl slip away, the firelight caught the curve of her shoulder, the trembling rise of her breath. She didn't flinch. Didn't hide. The storm outside broke, thunder cracking across the valley, but neither of them heard it. The world had narrowed to heat, to breath, to the unspoken truth between them. For years, Evelyn had been a woman made of silence and survival. Tonight she was something else, alive, unafraid, seen. And though neither spoke another word, both knew something had shifted forever. The night burned bright and long, and when the fire finally faded, the world outside seemed gentler somehow, as if even the desert itself understood what had been reclaimed. The desert was quiet again. Sunlight crept through the cracks in the shutters, soft and gold, spilling across the cabin floor. Evelyn woke slowly, her cheek resting against a heartbeat, steady, deep, familiar. For a moment she didn't move, afraid that if she opened her eyes, the night before would vanish like a dream. But when she did, he was there. Taza lay beside her, half covered by the quilt, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, his face peaceful in sleep. The hard lines that usually guarded him had softened. He looked younger, human. Her breath caught. For a long while she just watched him. Every detail, The curve of his jaw, the rise of his chest, the faint scars that mapped the story of his life, felt impossibly real. She reached out, hesitated, then let her fingertips brush his shoulder. His skin was warm, alive, and so was she. For the first time in years, Evelyn Carter felt something inside her wake up, a quiet joy she'd buried the day her husband died. It wasn't shame. It wasn't sin. It was something deeper, older, truer. When Taza stirred, his eyes opened slow, dark as riverstone. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said softly, "Morning comes fast in your world." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Too fast sometimes." He propped himself on one elbow, studying her face like he was memorizing it. "You regret?" She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, do you?" He looked away toward the window. "Regret is for men who have time. I do not." The words chilled her, soft though they were. "What do you mean?" He sat up, the quilt falling from his shoulders. "Soldiers ride the valley. I saw their smoke last night before storm came. They look for me." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. "Here, in this area?" He nodded once. "They think I kill settler near Dry Creek, not true. But truth mean nothing to them." She pushed herself up, clutching the blanket to her chest. "Then you can't stay here, not now. If they find you, they hang me," he finished quietly. "And you," her throat tightened. "No, I won't let that happen." He met her eyes then, steady, resolute. "Evelyn, you already done enough. Saved my life, gave me shelter. Now you must forget me." "Forget you?" Her voice cracked. "You think I could just go back to sewing and sweeping floors like nothing happened?" He didn't answer. He stood and began to dress, every movement controlled, deliberate. The air between them thickened with things neither could say. Evelyn rose too, her heart pounding hard. "You walk out that door, you'll be dead by sundown." Taza looked at her, and for a brief, shattering moment she saw the pain behind his calm. "Better I die free than live like ghost hiding in shadow." Her hand trembled as she reached for him. "Then I'll go with you." He stopped cold, his eyes wide. "No, you belong here." "I don't belong anywhere anymore," she whispered. "Not after last night." The words hit like thunder. Quiet but final. Taza's jaw tightened, but his hand came up, cupping her face. "You brave woman," he said softly. "Too brave for this world." Tears stung her eyes. "Then stay. We'll find a way." He shook his head slowly. "If I stay, soldiers burn your home. Take your land. Call you traitor." She wanted to argue, to scream, to hold him and never let go, but his eyes told her it was useless. He had already made his choice. When he bent to kiss her, it wasn't the heat of the night before. It was soft, aching, final. The kind of kiss that left a mark deeper than a scar. When he pulled away, he whispered, "When the wind comes from the south, I'll be near. Listen for it." And then he was gone. Evelyn stood by the doorway long after he disappeared into the desert haze. The sun climbed higher, the land blindingly bright. But inside, the cabin felt cold again. By noon, the heat was merciless again. Evelyn moved through the cabin in a daze, every sound sharp and distant. The morning felt like a dream she couldn't hold on to. His touch still lingered on her skin, his scent on the blanket, but outside the world was already closing in. The sound came first, hooves pounding against hard earth. Not one horse, many. Her heart stopped. She rushed to the window and froze. Down the valley road, a column of riders appeared through the dust, 6 men in blue coats, rifles glinting under the sun, U.S. cavalry. Taza had been right. They were coming straight toward her land. Her breath came fast as she backed away from the window. Her mind raced. There was no time to think, no time to hide. She grabbed the bucket by the door and threw it over the dying fire, dousing the smoke that might give her away. Then she saw it, on the table. His necklace. A piece of leather cord with a single carved stone left beside her cup. Her hand shook as she picked it up. She could almost hear his voice again, low, calm, steady. "When the wind comes from the south, I'll be near." But the wind was dead still now. Outside, the soldiers' voices grew louder. "Spread out." "Check the barn," one shouted. Evelyn forced her breathing to steady. She couldn't let them know he'd been here. If they found a trace, a footprint, a thread of his shirt, they'd kill him. And maybe her too. She wiped the table clean, hid the necklace in her apron pocket. then went to the door just as a hard knock rattled it. When she opened it, a man in a dusty blue uniform stood there, broad-shouldered, sunburned, eyes sharp as flint. His badge gleamed in the light. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Captain Holt, U.S. Cavalry, you alone out here?" Evelyn nodded, keeping her voice steady. "Always am." He scanned the yard. "We're tracking an Apache raider. Dangerous man. Killed a settler 2 days ago near Dry Creek. You seen anyone?" Her throat felt dry as sand. "No, sir. Haven't seen a soul for weeks." He studied her face for a long moment. "Mind if we look around?" She hesitated, just long enough to make his eyes narrow. "Just routine," he added. "Of course," she said quickly. "You'll find nothing but dust and chickens." 2 soldiers dismounted and began checking the barn. Evelyn stood in the doorway trying to look calm while her heart thundered like the hooves outside. Captain Holt stepped inside, his boots heavy on the floorboards. His eyes swept the room, landing on the single bed, the folded quilt, the faint scent of smoke. "You live out here alone?" "Yes." "No husband?" "Dead," she said simply. 5 years now." He nodded slowly, eyes still wandering. Then, without warning, he crouched near the hearth and picked something up. A dark strand of hair, her stomach twisted. "Strange," he said, holding it up to the light. "Not yours, I reckon." Evelyn's hands clenched behind her back. "I keep a brush by the window," she said quickly. "Wind blows through sometimes. Could have come from anywhere." He studied her a beat longer. Then, to her shock, he smiled faintly. "You got grit, ma'am. Most women would have bolted before we got close." She forced a smile. "No place to run," he straightened. "If you see anything, anyone, you send word to Fort Mason. That Apache's a ghost, but he leaves trouble behind. I'll remember that." When they finally rode off, she stood in the doorway until the dust settled. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Her knees gave way and she sank to the floor, shaking. The necklace slipped from her apron pocket, landing in her palm. She closed her fist around it. Outside, the wind shifted, soft, warm, whispering through the sage. From the south, she looked up sharply. Somewhere beyond the ridge, she thought she saw a flicker of movement, dark against the gold horizon. He was still out there, and she knew then what she had to do. She wouldn't wait for fate to take him. This time she would go. The sun hung low and red, spilling blood-colored light across the valley when Evelyn saddled her mare. Her hands shook as she tightened the cinch strap, but her mind was steady. She'd lived her whole life by fear, of loss, of loneliness, of what people might say. But now there was only one thought in her head: find him before they do. She slung a rifle across her shoulder and tucked the Apache's necklace beneath her blouse, close to her heart. The wind came from the south again, soft, warm, full of dust and memory. She took it as a sign. When she kicked the mare into motion, the cabin faded behind her like a dream. The desert opened wide, the horizon endless. The mare's hooves pounded over hard earth, kicking up sand and sage. Every few minutes, she scanned the ground for signs, hoofprints, a broken branch, anything that might tell her where he'd gone. Hours passed. The sun fell lower, painting the world an orange fire. Then near the mouth of the canyon she saw it. Tracks. Deep single file leading toward the cliffs. Her heart leapt. But then came another set. Bootprints. Soldiers. They'd found his trail too. Evelyn spurred her mare faster. The canyon walls rose around her, closing in like stone giants. The air grew cooler, the sound of rushing water echoing from somewhere deep inside. She pushed on, whispering his name under her breath. Taza, please be alive. The trail twisted through the narrow pass, and then she saw movement ahead, a dark figure on horseback, cutting through the canyon's shadow. Taza, she shouted. He turned sharply, disbelief flashing across his face as she galloped closer. Evelyn? When she reached him, she nearly threw herself from the saddle. He caught her before she fell, his strong arm steadying her. Are you mad? He demanded, eyes burning. You should be safe at home. Safe? She gasped. They came to the cabin, Taza. They're hunting you. You won't get far alone. He looked toward the canyon ridge, jaw tight. They close? Too close, she said. Maybe an hour behind. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the canyon wind whipping between them. You should go back, he said finally. They'll hang you for helping me. Then let them, she snapped. I'm not leaving you out here to die. His gaze softened, torn between pride and something deeper. You don't understand. If they catch us together, they'll kill you too. Then they'll have to catch me first. He stared at her. This woman who'd once trembled at shadows, now standing in the heart of danger with fire in her eyes. Then with a low breath he said, "You ride well, white woman. Better than most men," she shot back, her lips curving despite the fear. That earned the faintest smile from him. The sound of distant shouts shattered the moment. Taza's eyes darkened. "They're here." He grabbed her hand, pulling her into the saddle beside him. "Hold tight." She did. They rode hard, the canyon walls blurring past in streaks of stone and shadow. Bullets cracked through the air behind them, sparking off the rocks. The mare screamed and stumbled, but Taza urged her on, cutting through the narrow ravine like a hawk through wind. Evelyn clung to him, her heart slamming against her ribs. Dust burned her throat, tears stung her eyes, but she didn't let go. At the far end of the canyon, the path split, a steep climb to the ridge, or a dark drop toward the river below. Taza didn't hesitate. "Hold on." He yanked the reins, turning sharply toward the river trail. They plunged down the slope, hooves skidding on loose shale, the roar of water rising louder. Behind them, the soldiers shouted, shots echoing like thunder. Evelyn looked back once, saw the flashes of blue, the glint of rifles, and then they were gone, swallowed by the shadows below. They hit the riverbank hard, splashing through the shallows. The horses were trembling, lungs heaving. Taza turned to her, eyes fierce, alive. "We lose them for now." But they not stop. Evelyn nodded, breathless but steady. "Then we don't stop either." He looked at her a long time, then reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You ride with the heart of a warrior." "And you," she said, smiling faintly, "with the heart of a man worth dying for." The canyon wind howled around them, and though danger still hunted their heels, for that fleeting moment they felt free. The river wound like silver through the canyons, its waters whispering secrets to the stone. By the time dawn bled across the sky, Evelyn and Taza had ridden until their horses could go no farther. They stopped beneath a cluster of cottonwoods hidden by fog and rock. Both were silent, breathing hard, listening for the sound of pursuit. None came, only the rustle of leaves and the low call of a hawk overhead. Taza dismounted first, scanning the ridge. "They'll search the upper valley by noon," he said. "We follow the river, we reach the reservation lands by nightfall." Evelyn slid from her saddle, her legs trembling from exhaustion. "And if they find us before that?" He met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "Then we fight," she stepped closer. "And if fighting means dying?" He hesitated, then smiled, slow and soft. "Then I die free, not caged, not hunted." Evelyn swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "And what about me?" He reached out, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "You choose, White Dove, you always choose." For a long moment, the only sound was the river and their breathing. She took his hand and pressed it against her heart. "Then I choose you. Whatever comes." Taza's eyes darkened with something that went beyond words, something ancient and fierce. "You don't know what that means." "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." They stood like that, framed by morning light and drifting mist. Two souls who'd found each other in the emptiest place on earth. But the world wasn't done testing them yet. A rifle cracked through the air. The bullet struck the tree beside them, splintering bark. Taza grabbed her arm. "Down!" They dropped behind the rocks as another shot echoed. Horses screamed in the distance, voices shouting orders. The soldiers had found them. Evelyn's heart pounded as she clutched the rifle Taza had given her. "We can't outrun them this time." Taza's eyes flicked toward the ridge, then to her. "No, but we can make them think we did." Before she could ask what he meant, he was already moving. He led the horses downstream, splashing them through the shallows to hide their scent, then smacked their flanks and sent them galloping into the fog. When he came back, his face was set, calm, resolute. "They follow horses." "Gives us time," she touched his arm. "And then?" He didn't answer. Instead, he took the necklace from around his neck, the carved stone she'd once found on her table, and placed it in her hand. "Keep it," he said. "So you remember wind from the south?" Her throat ached. "Don't talk like that." He smiled faintly. "You always tell Storm to stop, but it never listens." Footsteps echoed up the canyon, boots on stone. Close now. Evelyn gripped the rifle tight. We'll stand together, he nodded once. Together. The first soldier appeared through the fog, rifle raised. Then another. 6 in all, fanning out across the riverbank. Hold your fire, one shouted. Surrender, Apache. Taza rose slowly, hands lifted, his body between them and Evelyn. No surrender, he said, his voice like thunder rolling off stone. The captain stepped forward. Holt. You're surrounded. Don't make this worse. Taza looked back at Evelyn, his eyes soft, almost peaceful. Go, he whispered. When they shoot, run south, her heart broke. I won't. He smiled, the kind of smile that carried both love and goodbye. You already have. The rifles cracked. Smoke filled the canyon. When it cleared, the soldiers found only the river rushing wild beneath them. No body, no trail, no proof. Just one woman kneeling on the rocks, clutching a blood-stained stone against her chest. Her face lifted to the wind. It blew from the south. Evelyn never returned to her cabin. Some said she rode toward Mexico, others that she vanished into Apache land, but those who passed near the old canyon swore they sometimes saw 2 riders at sunset. A dark-haired man and a woman in a pale dress, riding side by side through the dust and gold of the dying light. And when the wind came from the south, it carried her whisper still, undress me now, or I'll do it myself.